If you've made soap, then you've probably made soap that didn't work just as you expected. Like for instance, here I have a batch. You see the little openings? This got too hot and it's partially separated. So what I do is I make this cold process soap into a hot process soap. And I make it into noodles, soap noodles. And then I cook that up, melt it down, and reshape them into rounds. And it becomes a different type of soap. And it works, it's called rebatching. And the rebatching process works real well for soaps that like this doesn't work well. The soap itself doesn't even soap very well. But if I rebatch it, then it will. Especially since I'm combining it with some other soap that has cosmetic defects. The soap itself is fine. I use rebatching to, if I have soaps that are damaged, that have cosmetic damage, that have faded too much, because I don't use chemical colorants. Mine are not UV stable, so sometimes they discolor. And then I run them through. When they separate, which occasionally happens because I do a lot of milk, honey and other hot ingredients, and that excels the exothermic, the heat making reaction of the soap, of the lye, working with the oil. Now if you add milk, that becomes a little hotter. If you add honey, it becomes a little hotter even. And then if I add a basement that is in the middle of a 90-degree heat spell, then I get too hot and then it separates. I was planning on making these rounds for my felted soaps, but this way it doesn't work. Sometimes I make a new recipe, like my ginger recipe. I did the first one and I didn't realize that ginger is an accelerant as well, so that totally separated on me. I can technically, while it's separating and it's all liquidy, it's going through trays and it's right through separation, then you can get a whisk and in your mold you can mix it all back up and cool it down, but you have to keep doing that and it's not guaranteed that everything will be mixed back in, and it's not a cold process soap anymore. If you do that, if it's gone through the separation, then it's a hot process. And sometimes I can skip the shredding and heating step by just whisking it back together. But most of the time this is the safest bet. When I go through this, I know it'll work out. And I like making these rounds. I put a stamp in, milk soap, it's just a generic. I call them upcycled soaps. And that is my sale bin. And my customers are really appreciative. This is a really nice soap. And often I mix all kinds of leftovers together. So it's a ratatouille of everything. A ratatouille. But that makes for a unique, sometimes they're a little green, sometimes they're a little grey, sometimes they're beige, sometimes they're almost white. And I like that. It mixes things up. And no soap goes to waste. So this is my workhorse kitchen shredder. You need a shredder that has a noodle plate. It's like what you use for zucchini, making zucchini bread. These large ones. And you need a kitchen machine that can handle the stress, I guess, of the soap, because it can get from really, really hard. I mean, this soap it's rock hard. To this is nice. This is breakable. The other one I can't do that with. That's why it needs to be rebatched. I'm not supposed to be able to do that. And I sometimes have really sticky soap that I want to rebatch. And the machine needs to be able to take all that without burning out. This is my 4th machine. The other ones I all burned through them doing the rebatching, but they were all second-hand. So this time I splurged for an actual professional machine, and I must say maybe I should have done that sooner. This is a blessing in disguise, actually. It is so much easier, and it's very loud. So I will start grinding and no more talking. So one thing to keep in mind is that you'll get soap built up here, and this gets really hard on the machine. So every once in a while, go through and scrape that out. This is that rubbery, sticky stuff I was mentioning earlier. It's the friction of the machine which heats up the soap and makes it like sticky glue. And you don't want that to break your motor. So it doesn't have to be all the way clean, just enough so the disc can rotate freely. And there you go. One batch of ready to go soap noodles. So this actually looks like noodles. It's a mixture of shredded soap and noodle soap, and this will cook down really nice. You need a lot of surface area for it to be able to melt consistently without having blobs. So the next step in rebatching soap is to make an au bain-marie, or a double boiler. So I have 2 pots that I know fit together well. I put hot water in and make sure that when you put it in, you don't put enough so much because it floats, that when you get weights in it, it comes back up here. Then we add the soap without spilling too much. I wish you guys could smell this. It smells great. So that should be about it. Next step is to use some milk. I don't have any real milk left at the moment. My goat's already dried up. So I'm using some plain almond milk. It doesn't really matter, but you want those proteins in the milk in here because it makes the soap, it helps make the soap a little bit more slimy, and it's that which helps facilitates the dissolving of the soap, because remember, this is a sodium soap. It doesn't like to dissolve in liquid very well. So a little bit of milk. Don't put in so much that there is standing liquid at the bottom of the pan. Put in enough that everything's wet, but not so much you've got standing liquid, because that will later on make it more difficult to dry your soap. And I have 2 types of soap in here, as you see. I have very, very old dry soap, which is really sucking up the milk. Then I have the slightly wetter noodles. So that's why I'm mixing it, just to make sure I'm not overdoing. See, they're starting to get sticky. Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. So, now it's a matter of turning on the stove, turning on the heat, and patience. Lots of patience. It actually takes quite a while. As you can see, the boiling is quite vigorous, so you want to leave a little bit of room in between so it doesn't boil over too much. And it's already slinking in size as well. So I'll add a little bit more, the rest of the bucket. Make sure that it stays sticky and just keep on heating it. So we're about an hour in, and I added the leftovers and it's already slunk down, and I think, yes, we have liquid soap at the bottom. And there you go. That is rebatching soap. So now it's a matter of keeping this stirred around so everything gets a chance to get real hot. Yeah. You see how it's clumping? That's the right amount of moisture. You don't want to have it mushy, but you do want to have it sticky. So another thing to keep an eye out, is that after about an hour or so, you're going to lose your water. There's not that much water there in the bottom here. So I'm going to have to add a little fresh, just to make sure it doesn't boil dry, because that would be bad. And there you go. Yeah, it's all the way on there. And be a little careful, because it is boiling hot. Leaving room so it can well bubble, and then we'll heat it back up. Put the lid on, and that's it. The bubbling is starting to sound a little hollow again, so I could hear it was time to go scoop. And as you can see, the liquid soap is starting to come up at the sides. So now we want to make sure that all this gets mixed in and submerged. Oh, look at that. We're getting close. I want to have it a little bit more liquid than this, so it's easier to pour. Make sure all the stuff at the top is pushed in. I'm pretty sure it's ready to pour. Yeah, look at that. All nice and brown. Make sure it's well mixed. And you also see that the soap isn't actually as liquid as normal soap would be. And this is why you can mold rebatched soap, but you can't mold it with much detail, as it goes in blobby. It doesn't go in, it doesn't pour in, it blobs in, so you get air bubbles. So I'm just using regular circular molds. I'm not using anything fancy. So the next step is filling the molds, and I'm never really, because it's so blobby, I'm not able to do this with a pour, so I just blob it up and then spread it out with my rubber spatula. You'll see what I mean. It doesn't really come out. So I'm kind of approximating where I want it. And then it's a matter of scooping it in. So the soap that dries up at the edges, I actually, after we're all done with this, I scrape that off when it's all dry, and it goes back in the bin of soap that'll be rebatched next time. So it looks wasteful, but it's only flinter thin, and it's gonna go back in the main batch anyway. So if you want to make novelty soap, something I've done is at the stage we were just at, or maybe one iteration before, when it's all liquid but not quite all the way as thin as you would like, add a contrasting soap. Add fresh noodles of a contrasting soap color, maybe black soap or dark brown, from what you have cooked before. Add the noodles in, and before they are all melted, mold them, and then you get little flecks of color in your soap, which I think is really pretty, and I have done that. So as you can see, it's getting a little dry. That means it's starting to cool down. So if you think it's getting too dry for you, use a smaller amount. Or put the soap back on the stove for a bit. So the dry soap that is still in the pan, I don't stick it in right now because the soap is getting a little too dry. What I'll do is I make a little soap ball out of them to use for personal use in the kitchen. So that looks pretty good, and we'll let it dry. Because it's now a hot process soap, it doesn't actually need to cure anymore. The heating took care of that. But I do like to air dry it for a couple days before I use it. So I'll let these harden up. When they cool down, they become solid again. Then I'll pop them out, put them on like a cookie dish on a shelf, and let them dry. And then they are ready for use, which is a lot faster as with a generic cold process soap. So it's the next day, and I unmolded a bunch of the bars, and that's what they look like. And that's what I meant with the air pockets. So you don't want to use molds that are too specific. They come out easily, and I would give them a day or two, and then you can start using them. If you don't, this is the plain milk soap, so that's why it's a beige color. If you don't like the color, you can add a little bit of colorant like clay, turmeric, paprika, spices, or like I mentioned earlier, you can add a little bit of essential oil.